Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, the other day, I was very sad because the Celtics lost, and today, very happy because the Celtics won. It's not great how much it actually directly affects my mood based off of how the Celtics play. But hey, they played fantastic last night, so I'm in a fantastic mood, Sap.
So you're at the age where it still matters so much. You're in your early 30s and, you got a long life to lead. And I don't know why I'm going down this road of being morbid, but I just
I
turned
know. Come
59.
on.
So there's other issues that I got to deal with. But no, I was very pleased with the performance last night. And I expect them to bounce back. I mean, this team for the last 3.5 months of the regular season was the best team in basketball. They swept Brooklyn and it came out in game one, and I think they were, I wouldn't say intimidated by Milwaukee, but kind of pushed back by Milwaukee because Milwaukee's a different team than Brooklyn. Brooklyn offered no resistance. Milwaukee's going to give you resistance because they're a really good defensive team. They're physical and how they're the defending world champions. So I expect the Celtics to come out and play a much better game in game two. They did. I didn't exactly think that they'd go 13 of 20 from three in the first half, but they did that. That's 65%. The second half was a little spotty by then, though. They had a 25-point halftime lead, and they kind of cruised from that point forward to win the game by 23 points and even the series up at a game apiece. But we talked about the other day that some adjustments they'd have to make on offense, and I have no problem with them taking a bunch of threes because that's what Milwaukee's going to give you. The key last night, I thought, was a lot of dribble drive, then kickouts, some open shooters. So they were getting better looks than they did in game one. Also, they swung the ball a little bit from side to side, which tires that Milwaukee defense out, gives you better looks. And also, they weren't afraid to take mid-range jumpers, which is something that, for some reason, a lot of the league is opposed to. But, Jet, we know a lot of guys that are in the Basketball Hall of Fame that made their living taking mid-range jumpers, most notably a guy that played here for 15 years, Paul Pierce. You know, you can make those shots, and they can really loosen up the defense. And I think that did enough for the Celtics last night, opened up the three-point territory. And let's not obviously forget the biggest thing in the first half was Jaylen Brown was electric. 25 points. He looked like an all-star player in game two. In game one, he didn't look like a really good player. So that was a huge jump. And that's the biggest reason they won that game. Jaylen Brown was just sensational in the first half.
Yeah, he was tremendous, Sap. I mean, he clearly came out with a point to prove after he didn't play particularly well in game one, whether it was, nerves or the hamstring was bothering him in game one. And now a little bit of time has passed. And so he was able to heal up a little bit more. Unclear which of those it was, could have been both. But yeah, he was phenomenal in the first half. And Sap, as you were alluding to with the mid-range game, and I don't know if you listened to my post-game breakdown and all last night, but I did give you credit, and I did on Twitter as well, because I think the first two Celtics made baskets changed the complexion of the game. And if you go back and look, it was a mid-range shot by Al Horford, and it was a mid-range shot by Jaylen Brown. That was the first 4 points the Celtics had on the board. The other attempt they had, and their first three possessions were miss at the rim by Derek White, who I thought was awful. And then make from Al Horford, make from Jaylen Brown. That was their first three offensive possessions. And I think just the fact that they were willing to take those little mid-range shots and hit them changed the complexion of the game in terms of how the Bucks defense had to react. They suddenly couldn't just say, okay, we're going to let them take these little bunny shots because they'll make them all day long. So they had to, pack it in a little bit more, defend those guys there. That opens the threes a little bit more. It opens the little driving, lanes a little bit more. So I think that what you said on, Monday, Sap, talking about, hey, why don't the Celtics try this? I think they did, and it worked perfectly. And you don't even need to do it all game long. Just the fact that they were willing to do it in the first couple of possessions of the game and they cashed in on it. Because, those guys, the guys in Celtics are good shooters, so that shouldn't be a little 15-foot jump shot for Jaylen Brown. He should be able to knock that down all day. And so I think that just putting that bug in the Bucks' head that, hey, we can take these shots and we will make them if you give them to us wide open, it changed the way the Bucks play defense and it opened up a lot more for the Celtics offensively.
It also got Jaylen Brown going, right? That first shot, if it goes in, you feel
Yeah,
good
seeing
about
it goes in
yourself.
makes a big difference. That's true.
Absolutely. So let's forget game one. Now we're on to game two, and he was sensational, especially in the first half. Also, if Milwaukee only has to defend the paint or 3-point territory, it's easier on that defense. Now you've got to also defend longer twos or, shorter twos or whatever the case may be. You've got to defend all of the court. It's no different than in football. If you're facing a passing attack and a quarterback that can throw every pass in the book, that puts more pressure, taxes that defense because you got to defend every blade of grass. Well, the Celtics made Milwaukee have to defend the paint, also the rest of the 2-point territory outside the paint, and obviously the 3-point territory where they took 43 threes last night and hit 20 of them. They're taking 93 threes in this series, which is 22 more threes than twos. They're taking more threes than twos, and they've made more threes than twos in this series in both games, something they did only twice during the regular season. So the Celtics are taking what Milwaukee gives them. But you're so right, Jed, that those little mid-range jumpers that they took to start the game, one by Horford, one by Jaylen Brown, kind of loosened everything up. Then they just went from there and had a 15-3 lead before you sat down and finished your sandwich or your soft drink. And from that point on, they were in control of the game. The defense stepped up. They did a great job against Giannis. He was god-awful in the first half. He did well in the second half because that's what Giannis does. He'll recover from a bad first half, pretty much unlike any superstar in the league because he's not to be deterred. He had a good second half, but they'd already built up a 25-point lead. So that's the key on offense. Is this series going to come down to if the Celtics can make threes or not? That's what it's going to come down to? Because that's been the case in these first two games. Although let's not forget, they were 18 of 50 from three in the first game, which is about their average. So it wasn't like they were god awful from three. It's just they had too many turnovers in game one and couldn't get back on defense, and Milwaukee made them pay for that. So if it comes down to that, you may see a 7-game series with no close games. There's a possibility of that, Jed. I know the first series against Brooklyn was a sweep with all close games, right? The Celtics won those games by 1,
Sure.
6, 7, and 4, a total of 18 points. You may see a 7-game series between these two teams with no close games. That's a possibility. It does happen. And people will talk about the great 80s, which, I still think is the greatest decade of play in the NBA with the Lakers and the Celtics and the Sixers and all those great players. I think the recent basketball is the second best decade. The 10s and now into the 20s, stretching it out a little bit. But the Lakers and Celtics, when they would face each other, they'd play 7-game series and there'd be 5 blowouts because that's what happens in basketball. It's not the Tour de France. The Celtics aren't going to take this 23-point victory and start game 3 with a 23-point lead in Milwaukee. It's back to 0-0. So whatever happens in the first two games kind of are forgotten. You make those adjustments and you go from there. So you could see 5 blowouts in this series and maybe a couple close games, and it still goes to 7 games and comes down to how well the Celtics shoot from 3.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is, Sap, that if a team gets up big at some point early in the series, there is, I think, an element of, okay, well, we know we have more games left in this series. Why are we going to absolutely kill ourselves and expend all of our energy to try to come back in this when we know, okay, well, we have a game in 2 days against the same team. So I think that there's, less of that where really their teams take more of a calculated approach to it and being like, okay, we know we're going to play this team again. We don't have to completely, if we go all out and we still don't get the win, that's really, then we're going to have a really tough time coming back in this series.
Right. Unless you're Doc Rivers and you leave your starters in with a 29-point lead and 4 minutes left. I mean, now you're paying for it.
That's a whole other story.
Having Joel Embiid available because he's got a fractured orbital bone. But yeah, that's what's going to happen. You're not old enough to remember Super Bowls that were all blowouts. I mean, when I grew up, I thought every Super Bowl was a blowout, and I look back and they pretty much were, 55-10, 46-10, 38-9. I mean, these are actually real scores.
Yeah, weren't the conference championship games more competitive? Wasn't that what it was?
Way more competitive. And then you get to the Super Bowl, and for like 15 straight years, the NFC was just better. They had the 49ers. Then they had the Cowboys, and in between they had the Giants, and the Redskins were all dominant, and they just blew people out. I think the AFC won 1 Super Bowl over about a 17, 18-year period. That was the Raiders in 1983. Other than that, the NFC dominated, and the Super Bowls were over by halftime. You get to the halftime show and go, okay, that was nice, and the second half was just playing out the string. You're going to get that in some of these NBA games because you're right, Jeff, because if a team gets up, it's like, well, why are we going to waste all this energy, cut it to 10 and lose anyway? let's move on to the next game and make sure that we're saved up for that. There's no injury concerns. Fatigue becomes an issue. I'm not saying that you throw up the white flag, in the middle of the third quarter down by 15. That's still a makeable situation. And look, Milwaukee did cut it to 12 last night because the Celtics offense was god awful in the third quarter. Went back to ISO basketball, did move the basketball, and started missing.
They took their foot off the gas for sure.
They sure did. Because you look at the first half, Jet, the Celtics had 23 made field goals in the first half, 13 threes and 10 twos. They had 17 assists on those 23 made field goals. That's exceptional.
Yeah, the ball was moving tremendously. There was, I think there was a play. I don't remember what quarter it was where they were moving the ball. It ended up in an Al Horford layup where it was
incredible,
swinging around all over the back, like lightning fast. So you know what play I'm talking about. And
absolutely,
that was just the epitome of great team basketball and ball movement.
Horford didn't even catch it. He kind of redirected it because it was towards the end of the shot clock. But I think everybody touched the ball once and several guys touched it 2 or 3 times. It was just constant movement. That wears out the defense and it's frustrating. You're playing hard defense for 24 seconds. The other team scores. Now you're a little bit derailed. So
it's a backbreaker, those types of plays.
I think there was about 3 minutes left in the second quarter and they were clicking on all cylinders. And that's almost like you're toying with the opposition. That to me was a backbreaking moment in the game among many big made shots by the Celtics.
Yeah, and again, like you said, the Celtics offense definitely sputtered in the third quarter, but I credit to them in that they were. I talked about this a little bit in the post game last night. The Celtics were only letting Milwaukee go on these little mini runs,
right.
6-0, 5-0, 6-2. They were keeping them at arm. Like Milwaukee was threatening, and then the Celtics said, we're not going to let you go on a big run here. You'll give you 6-0. We'll give you 7-3, but we're not going to, let you go on a 15-0 run. It's not going to happen. And that was enough to keep them at arm's length for the rest of the game. So, they did what they had to do in the first half where they dominated Milwaukee. And then in the second half, it was more of a protect the lead strategy.
Sure.
So is that I don't know that, can you win that way? Can you win 4 games that way against a really good team? Probably not, but it worked for one game. And that's all they needed to do. And Sap, you're talking about them. Is the series going to come down to if the Celtics make their threes or not? It might, but I kind of hope not, because you would like to see a team that's competing for a championship be able to be more varied offensively.
Right.
Especially when you have 2 great offensive talents in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who should be able to do more than just shoot threes. You have guys who are 3-point specialists on this team, Peyton Pritchard, Grant Williams, and Grant Williams, I was ragging on him so much last season. Man, is he transformed into a valuable player, and he was fantastic. I thought, Jaylen had the 30 points and was amazing the first half. Tatum had 29 points. I thought Grant Williams was the Celtics' best player yesterday because of the defense.
Because of the defense against Giannis. And Giannis is going to get his, but Grant Williams made him work his butt off. And Grant Williams is giving up 6 inches against Giannis, but he makes him work hard. You didn't have to send as many double teams to Giannis, so that didn't allow Milwaukee to get open threes like they did in game 1. Milwaukee only took 18 3-pointers last night, and they only hit 3. So that was a big part of the game. Meanwhile, you're going 20 for 43. So the disparity in 3-point points was 60-9, which is second all time in the history of the NBA in terms of the postseason. I think Golden State, to no one's surprise, with Draymond, Steph, and Kevin Durant on that roster, still holds the edge with 54-point differential in terms of 3-point scoring.
You can't win when one team shoots 46% from 3 and the other team shoots 16%. You can't win that way.
You're not going to win. No, it's like having a football team that throws for 450 yards. I mean, a lot of times when you throw for 450, you lose because a lot of those yards come because you're from behind. But in general, if you're putting those types of yards up from the beginning of the game, you're gonna win those games. But yeah, Grant Williams was sensational last night. And again, he's kind of turned into PJ Tucker, hasn't he? I mean, we always talked about getting a PJ Tucker type player on the Celtics, and kind of like PJ Tucker, 6'5", stout, can hit that corner 3. That's PJ Tucker's specialty. And just plays real physical defense. The only difference is PJ Tucker wears his socks up to his knees and Grant Williams doesn't. That's about the only difference between the 2 players. But give him credit. He banged around with Giannis last night. That can't be easy to do because Giannis is such a force. And, the more I watch Giannis, and we both agree he's the best player in basketball. He isn't the most aesthetically pleasing guy, right? It's like
No, he's a bulldozer. He's a bulldozer.
Car crashes out there. I'm now convinced he's kind of a more athletic version of Moses Malone, because that's how Moses Malone played. Just sheer will, effort, determination, all of that stuff, and a lot of skill. But this guy is a better athlete than Moses Malone was, but it's a similar type game. He just wears you down. He can't be fun to play against because his elbows, and he's kicking, Rob Williams in the nuts in game one.
Right.
And Grant Williams is getting banged to the floor. That's how you have to play Giannis. And, Giannis doesn't have like a lot of refined moves down there. He's not like Hakeem Olajuwon, whose footwork was impeccable and he'd end up hitting a little fadeaway. Giannis a little bit different because he's always kind of going forward towards the basket. If you can get him to kind of step back going away, you've kind of won already. Look, if he hits those shots, tip your cap. He's that much better. But give Grant Williams a ton of credit. Yeah, from start to finish, once he got in the game, he may have been the most important player because of the defensive end. Jalen was sensational in the first half, and really Jason Tatum kind of closed it out whenever Milwaukee got close. He was always able to hit that three and extend the lead.
Yeah, I think what the Celtics are doing with Giannis, because again, he's going to get his numbers no matter what. Like you said, he was terrible in the first half. He still ended up with 28, 7, and 9, and a block and a steal. Like, okay, but he's just going to do that. But he wasn't efficient, which is unusual for him. 11 of 27 from the floor, Sap. I think what the Celtics are doing is, we talked a little bit about building the wall at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of this series. And I think the Celtics aren't so much doing that initially, and are doing that almost at the rim, where they're trying to have multiple bodies at the rim. They're not going to give him a clean look when he's down in the paint. And sometimes, again, he'll just power over you and dunk it. He's just that good. But they're trying to make it so, giving him different angles to the rim and different things like that. So I think it is affecting him as much as you can affect him. He's stronger than everybody on the Celtics. I think he's the strongest player in the league. So you can bump him and stuff, but that doesn't really throw him off that much. I think it's like when you're throwing, you have to just change his direction as much as possible.
Yep.
And I think that's what's making him a little less efficient.
It's almost like facing Rob Gronkowski a little bit when Gronk was in his prime. He's just bigger, stronger, and better than everyone. So if you could just get him off his rhythm a little bit, maybe redirect him, kind of get in his kitchen a little bit, just do all these little things and try to disrupt him. You can't really stop the guy because he's too good. And Grant Williams and Al Horford have been the primary defenders. And then you got Rob Williams, who's kind of coming over from maybe the weak side to contest something at the rim. I think that's a great point, Jet. They're not building a wall and saying, come to us, we'll stop you. But they are playing them kind of straight up, and then maybe occasionally sending some help, because you don't want to leave the three-point shooters alone, because Connaughton, Allen, Holiday, these guys can hit threes. Heck, Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, bigs, can hit threes. And that's how Milwaukee was able to win game one. You're better off having Giannis score in the 30s, but kind of keep those assists down, because he's not setting up his teammates for all those threes. Excellent defense the Celtics have played against Giannis in his first two games. He's shooting 20 of 52 from the floor. That's 38%, Jet. He's normally a 55% shooter from the field. So you've really made him less efficient than he normally is. And you did that to Kevin Durant in the first series, two different types of players, but your defense through 6 games has been outstanding.
Absolutely. And I think, total defensive effort, that may have been the Celtics' best defensive performance, in the playoffs, maybe in the regular season. Milwaukee's a very good offensive team, holding them to 86 points. I think that was a season low for them. That's outstanding. So yeah, definitely credit to the Celtics defense last night. And that's, that's their identity. They're, as their defense goes, they go. That's where they feed offensively, off of turnovers, off of making the other team work really hard. And they feel good about when they play good defense, everything else feels good. So I think that, we were both anticipating a long series, Sap, and it seems to have the looks of that. It's not the Brooklyn Nets, it's not the Chicago Bulls. The two teams' first round opponents. These are both much more competitive teams, and we expect a lengthy series. So Sap, let's move on to the other game last night, the Grizzlies and Warriors, as the Grizzlies did what the Celtics did and even their series up at 1 game apiece. The story going into this game was, the Draymond Green ejection and how he was going to respond, and the Warriors were going to respond. Well, we got another ejection 2-3 minutes into the game, as Dylan Brooks, my Oregon guy, who I love, he was tossed for a flagrant on Gary Payton Jr. or Gary Payton the second. Is it Gary Payton the second or Gary Payton the third? I don't know how many.
I think it's the third. They just call him the mitten instead of the glove.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So Gary Payton. And unfortunately, Payton landed really hard on that foul too, and fractured his elbow. So he's out for a while. Sap, I guess the first question is, well, should he have been ejected? Was it a dirty play? I know Steve Kerr talked about breaking the code after, or the whatever you want to call it. So your thoughts on the Dillon Brooks ejection?
Steve Kerr got punched in the eye by Michael Jordan during a practice, right?
Yes, he did.
I would say it was a dirty play without question. It seemed to be somewhat premeditated too. It's almost like Memphis came out, they had an 8-0 lead, and they just wanted to prove to Golden State, you're not going to intimidate us, because Draymond Green, who we both love, isn't afraid to speak his mind. And he was talking about on the TNT show the night before or whatever, that, they feel real comfortable now against Memphis, more so than they did during the regular season. And I'm sure Memphis heard that and said, well, we're going to make you uncomfortable. They didn't go after Draymond Green till later in the game when they got him bloody. But yes, Dillon Brooks takes out, Payton, and now you've got, an injured player, an ejected player, and you've got a lot of bad blood in this series. You must love this series, because so far in 2 games, we've had 2 ejections, bloodied noses and eyes, really hotly contested games. Ja Morant's backing down from no one. He's not intimidated by anybody, even Steph Curry. Not that Steph Curry's an intimidating guy, but he's intimidating to go against because he's so damn good. But this, I predicted this to be a long series too, because I tell you, Memphis is about as strong-minded a young team as I've ever seen. Maybe they're too stupid to know any better, or too inexperienced to know any better, but they don't give up. Like, they came back in that first series against Minnesota, game in and game out, after being behind in the fourth quarter. They were just so impressive in beating Minnesota. Now, that's not going to necessarily happen against Golden State, because Golden State's not Minnesota. They're not going to blow leads. But that Memphis team is tough-minded. We know how good Golden State is with all that experience. This is a classic series of the veteran team trying to win, through its talent, but also through its experience and guile, that being Golden State. And now you contrast that with Memphis, that has talent, plays defense, is hard-nosed, and has a transformational player, Ja Morant. That's a fascinating series. I think the Milwaukee Celtics series obviously is must-watch TV, because I think they're the 2 best defensive teams in basketball. But this Memphis Golden State series, is already gotten chippy after 2 games.
Very chippy. And I don't think that Brooks did it maliciously. Like, I'm going to hurt this guy. I think the ejection was warranted. I would like to see him not be suspended. In general, in the playoffs, I really hate ejections. The games are so important, and I don't think anybody's going out there and saying, I'm going to try to hurt this guy, and because they don't want to get tossed from the game. So, like, I don't know if the NBA wants to take a look at it. Very unlikely that they'll take a look at these ejecting people in the playoffs. I mean, I think they'll just stick with what they've always done. But, if they wanted to do something where, like, it's a really bad foul, maybe you assess the guy 2 personals. I don't know. But in general, I don't like ejections.
Well, isn't there's a point system, right? So if, say, Dillon Brooks, now that's a flagrant 2.
Yeah.
If he goes out again and commits a flagrant 2, then he does get suspended for a game, correct?
Right. Yes.
That's why Draymond Green got suspended back in 2016, because he reached the 4-point total. That's what people didn't quite understand. The league didn't just decide, well, let's throw Draymond Green out of game 5 because we want to let LeBron James win the championship. That was kind of the way it works. I mean, I was going to ask you this too, to quickly go back to the Celtics series. How many technicals is Jason Tatum away from serving a suspension? Because he gets a lot of technicals.
It resets
in the playoffs?
In the playoffs, yeah, it does, because otherwise he'd be in real danger.
Yeah, because I mean, in game 2, they got an 18-point lead, and he decides to get a technical, which is always idiotic. He complains as much as any player in the league.
He does, yeah.
Which is frustrating, but, it comes with the total package of being a great player. The great players like to complain. So, yeah, you just got to
What I found was funny, Sap, was somebody had footage of his son, Deuce, on the sideline during one of the plays, too. They got fouled, and now Deuce is old enough to emulate his father, and Tatum got fouled, and he's standing up, and he's waving his arms, so he's Deuce might pick up a technical at some point in the
Deuce
playoff.
he may get ejected from the game. They'll ask him to leave, like some of the fans in the front row.
Uh,
But yeah, that Memphis Golden State series is going to be fascinating. And again,
Well,
Ja Morant was just, I mean,
yeah,
what more can you say about him? He's
obviously the
incredible.
biggest story,
Right.
is that, it's similar to the other series in the West with Dallas and Phoenix, in that, okay, Dallas has one transformational all universe player in Luka, and then he's not in game one. He got virtually no help from anybody else. Ja Morant got very little help from anybody else on his team last night. The second highest scorer was Zaire Williams, who had 14 points off the bench.
What's up with Desmond Bain, who had a great first round series?
I don't know.
Horrible.
Maybe he's hurt. I'm not sure, but
Could be, yeah.
But okay, as much as one player can win a game for you, that's what happened last night. Ja Morant won the game for them on his back, on like Atlas. Literally put the entire team on his back. 47 points. That's his second 47-point game in his young postseason career, Sap, which is incredible. And down the stretch, Golden State hangs their hat defensively. I know we talk about all these offensive super weapons like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, but they have identified as a defensive team. Mm-hmm. They could not stop Ja Morant. They couldn't do anything about it. And we know that Steph is not a great defender. And so they're going to take, but Golden State was trying everything. They were playing 5-on-1, and he was still scoring at the end of the game last night.
He's a bigger version of Allen Iverson, right? And if he can ever develop a consistent, not a great, but a consistent outside shot, good Lord, he's going to win scoring titles and MVPs and championships, because going to the basket, he's fearless. Iverson was what, 5'10 and a half, 5'11", Ja's 6'2", 6'3". So, and I think he's got even more elevation in his game than Allen Iverson, but they were, like Iverson, just a fearless player. I'm assuming Iverson and Michael Jordan, watching these games, now look at Ja Morant as their favorite player in the league. Is that being far-fetched in me saying that?
I think Iverson said as much. I don't know, what Jordan even.
Jordan probably hates everybody.
Yeah.
He doesn't like anybody. But I would say that Iverson loves Ja Morant. I think Russell Westbrook likes Ja Morant. We know Ja Morant's idol growing up was Russell Westbrook and a little bit of Allen Iverson, because they're all kind of the same player. They're not the most efficient point guards. They're great athletes, fearless, go to the basket. But this guy could use either hand. And if he can start developing that little floater that Tony Parker developed years ago and Trae Young has now, oh my Lord, how do you stop him? Because he's just sensational. And like Luka, kind of carrying his team. And it's kind of interesting to compare Luka to Ja Morant, because they do it so differently. And Luka just kind of plays at his own pace and sails along and hesitates. And next thing you know, he's dunking at the rim, or he's hitting a fadeaway. He's making great passes. But yeah, Ja Morant, he's the next great star in this league. And I think he's going to make this a series. I still think ultimately Golden State pulls this out in 6 or 7 games, but that young man is going to make this a close series just by his sheer will.
Well, what do they do? What's Golden State do, defensively on him? Do they just put Draymond on him, and say, okay, you know what? We're going to put our best defender on you all game?
Yeah, because I don't know if Clay's really up for the challenge now after being away for 2 years.
He looks like a shell of himself. He really does.
He's not quite the same. I mean, Wiggins is long, but does Wiggins have the compete level that Draymond has? No. Or that Ja has? No. Steph, you don't want to do that, because you really want Steph dealing with that on the defensive end. I guess what they try to do is you force him to shoot from the outside, because, when he gets a head of steam going to the basket, it's just lights out, because he's ambidextrous, and ambidextrous. I'll speak English anytime soon. Ambidextrous, but he uses his elevation to his advantage as well. And let's not forget, Golden State's not a really big team. If you saw Memphis, Milwaukee in the finals, it would be difficult for Ja to get to the rim against Giannis and Lopez and those big bodies. But against Golden State, I think he'll be able to. I mean, look, he's one scoop shot away from having a 2-0 lead in the series. Now, again, if Memphis wins game 1, maybe game 2 plays out differently. Who knows? But he's a major problem. The only thing is, again, make him shoot from the outside and hope he misses. I mean, that's one way to play defense against him, because any other way doesn't seem to work.
And I think both teams look at this game and go, we could play a lot better. So it's really,
Right.
Ja Morant was the outlier in terms of fantastic performances. Cause if you look, Golden State shot 7 of 38 from three, Sap, which
Crazy.
is
Crazy.
awful. And not much better for Memphis, 14 of 45. So, I think people were saying, oh, Golden State won't shoot like that again. So they'll probably, win the rest of these games in this series. But then you can go look at Memphis and say, how likely is it that nobody else contributes? Because that's really what happened last night. I mean, again, credit to Zaire Williams. Okay, put in 14 points, but like Dylan Brooks played 3 minutes. Desmond Bane had 5 points. Jaren Jackson Jr. only 12 points. And they won the game. So I think both teams can look at it and say, we can play a lot better than this. And yet Memphis came out with the win.
That's a long series that we're looking at, 6 or 7 games. Now it's 1-1, so it's guaranteed to go at least 5. So it's not really a hot take to say this thing's going at least 6 or 7, but I felt that going into it again, because you don't have any team in the league right now, Jet, that is perfect or close to perfect. You don't have a team in the league that's like Golden State with Durant, Steph, and Clay and Draymond, right? They've just breezed through the playoffs without much of an effort. Every team in the league right now that's left has some sort of flaws. Milwaukee's dealing with an injury, and Philadelphia is certainly dealing with an injury with Joel Embiid, and Memphis is not the most experienced team. And like you said, who's going to help Ja out? Who the hell's going to help Luke out? Phoenix is really good, but they're not at the level that Golden State was 5 years ago. Golden State's still outstanding, but they don't have Kevin Durant like they did 5 years ago. So you got a bunch of teams that are really good, but none of them look like they're capable of just breezing through the playoffs, like, say, the 16-17 Golden State Warriors that won 16-1 in the postseason. You're not going to see
I don't
that.
even think there's a team that's the equivalent of those LeBron Cavs teams on the
or the LeBron Heat teams. Yeah, I mean, these are more flawed teams, and this is what makes it exciting, right? Because we went into this round saying, well, without Embiid, Philly really doesn't have a chance, and maybe Dallas and Memphis, because they don't have a second star, doesn't have a chance, but the other 5 teams could all win it. Boston, Milwaukee, Miami, Phoenix, Golden State all could lay claims to winning a title. I don't think any of those 5 teams winning it would surprise us. That's good. That's a change for basketball, because normally
you would always pick the field over an individual team in this case right now.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And when it was a couple of years ago, you'd always pick Golden State instead of the field.
Remember that pool we had one time at the Herald, and I had the first pick. I picked Golden State and said, I don't really need anybody else. Well, Toronto beat them in the finals. That was a surprise, but every other time it was the right pick, other than, of course, when my man brought Cleveland back from 3 games to 1 down in 2016, which I like to always remind people on every podcast that I can.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned him, Sap, because we are going to wrap up with talking about your guy, LeBron. You've managed to, even though he's been out of the playoffs, and we've been doing these podcasts, these playoff podcasts for like about a month now, you still have managed to work him into almost every conversation, which, it's very impressive.
I'm very impressive, and he's even more impressive.
And you know what? He's doing something similar where he has worked himself into virtually every conversation, because he is tweeting during every game. So, LeBron loves basketball. That's never a doubt. He's been watching all these games, but he had a tweet last night that I made no sense to me. I did not understand it. So I asked you for your help, as you are the LeBron whisperer. Let me read the tweet, and then you can translate it for me. I'll give you my thoughts on it afterwards. He was watching the Grizzlies game last night. He watched the Celtics game too, because he was tweeting out about that one. This is what he said during the Grizzlies game. Ja, so damn tough. There's no way Ja even had to be in most improved player talks. This guy is a flat out star and always has been. Real basketball brains know. Not the majority of dweebs who don't even watch basketball on those voting ballots. Okay, Sap. So he's saying Ja Morant, who just won most improved player of the year, is too good to improve, is too good to win most improved. And then he took a shot at the people who vote.
Yeah, the early part of it I can kind of understand. And his nemesis, Skip Bayless, actually agrees with him. Like, how can you give Ja Morant most improved? He was the 2nd pick in the draft. He was already an all-star last year, right? I mean, and we saw what he did in the postseason last year. He was exciting and very effective. So how can he be most improved? Most improved usually goes to a guy who was playing 17, 18 minutes, coming off the bench, doing some nice things, and all of a sudden elevates the next year to score 22 points a game, become a prominent figure on a contending team. I mean, I thought Rob Williams could have maybe won that award. And Rob Williams, his improvement was he actually played a lot this year. That was the big
I said
difference,
Jordan
right?
Poole.
Jordan Poole made the most sense, right? Because he went from 11, 12 points a game to 20 points per game for one of the best teams in basketball. That made more sense than Ja. Now, there's always one player out there that, it doesn't seem impossible that a guy could be MVP one year and most improved the next year. That's nearly an impossibility, but that would be a guy who just took it to a totally different level. But I could kind of see where LeBron was going with that. The part about, getting on the voters and all that stuff, maybe LeBron's just pushing back without him putting himself into the conversation, although he's in the conversation, because he's only won 4 MVPs, and we both agree he probably should have 6 or 7. I mean, he could have voted for the guy MVP for 8 straight years. I mean, did Steph Curry really deserve that first MVP over LeBron? Did Derrick Rose deserve his MVP over LeBron? Did Westbrook really deserve his MVP over LeBron, even though he did average the triple-double? That was more of a statistical-driven MVP. So, and even Giannis's second MVP, you could make a case LeBron should have been MVP that year. So maybe LeBron's pushing back saying, hey, I only have 4 MVPs. I should have more. And also, I still think it bothers LeBron that he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year when he was in Miami, and Marc Gasol won Defensive Player of the Year. That's the one thing he hasn't accomplished that I think kind of hurts him a little bit. Doesn't hurt him in his legacy. I mean, I think he's the greatest player ever. But Jordan has that over LeBron, like a Defensive Player of the Year award, which LeBron didn't get that year, when he probably should have gotten it over Marc Gasol. And maybe he's just pushing back against the voters. But for the most part, the voters have always liked LeBron. There's been some years where he played 2/3 of a season and still made second team All NBA. I think he might make second team All NBA this year, even though he played only 58 games. And maybe LeBron just had too many tequilas last night and was, drunk tweeting. Maybe that's a possibility.
Here's the problem I have with it, which the part that I don't get. I would have voted for Jordan Poole when we did our end of the season awards. That's who I gave it to. But Ja Morant did pick up his scoring average by 8 points, Sap.
No, that's impressive. Yeah. Yeah.
And he picked up his rebounding average by almost 2 rebounds a game. He picked up his steals. He picked up his blocks. He picked up his free throw percentage.
He shot better from 3.
3-point percentage. Right. He picked up his field goal percentage.
He was improved. Yeah.
So I don't know that just because a player is already really, really good, that discounts them from winning most improved player. I don't follow that logic. Like, if you look at,
you're right.
So again, like, he picked up virtually every single across the board. He improved in all of his stats. So I don't have a problem with him winning the award. I don't think it's crazy and he's saying, LeBron's just saying, like, real basketball brains. No, like, I just look at the number. Like, did he improve? Did Ja Morant? This is an easy question. Did Ja Morant improve significantly from last year to this year? Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
So then why shouldn't he be involved in the conversation?
He was also the leader of the second best team in basketball this year, record-wise. Now, I know he missed 25 games, and Memphis went 20-5 when he didn't play, but they were still damn good when he played, and he's going to finish, I would think, 7th or 8th in MVP voting. He's probably in the same group with, say, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, below the big 4 of Luka.
Yeah, if he played more games, he would be more.
He'd be right there. I mean, I think the top 4 are going to be probably Joker, Embiid, Giannis, and Luka. Those should be the top 4 MVP candidates. And then after that, Tatum, Booker, Ja Morant, pick a few other guys. Yeah. Maybe Steph gets some votes, whatever.
DeRozan
will get a few votes because Chicago was damn good for most of the season. So, I mean, now he's become an MVP candidate. He's become one of the biggest stars in the league. And we can see what he does in the postseason, which has nothing to do with the regular season award. But, I mean, he certainly was deserving. I think LeBron was just, I don't know, maybe he just was bored and decided he's just going to tweet out during this game. And he generally gives a lot of love to the young players. I don't know if he's quite recruiting them, because how many more years is LeBron playing? And Memphis, unless they're complete idiots, are going to obviously give the max to Ja and make him the centerpiece. He already is the centerpiece of their franchise. They're going to actually try to find a second guy to go with Ja to really be a contending team. So that part of it, it's just his opinion. Everybody can have a different opinion, but there's no need to shit on all the voters. Again, other than I think he's pushing back that, he should have
I think he holds
MVPs.
Grudges, definitely, like every athlete does.
In a very, very, very passive aggressive way.
Yeah.
Like more than anyone. I mean,
no doubt.
I mean, he and Aaron Rodgers, my 2 favorite guys, are both very, very similar. They hear everything, and they kind of react in a similar way. Durant's a little bit different. He's also the three of them are all passive aggressive, and they just hear things where Jordan heard it, but again he didn't have to react to it. But again, there wasn't Twitter then. I wonder
Right.
what
Big
Jordan would have
difference.
been like on Twitter. I mean, he probably would have been down in some scotches or brandies and tweeting crazily. Again, we're going back 30 years ago. There was no way of him communicating that other than, punching a wall or a teammate or just taking it out on the poor opponent. So it's a little bit different. But Kobe and Jordan were aggressive, right, in their reaction to things, whereas LeBron, Durant, and Aaron Rodgers in football are more passive aggressive. It's a completely different way. And maybe it's a generational thing too, right? Maybe it could be millennials. And look, I love millennials. You're a millennial. I love millennials more than I like my generation, which technically I'm a baby boomer, but at the tail end of it. And Jordan's a baby boomer. Kobe's, I think, Generation X, Gen X, because
Yeah,
he's
I'm
born
not sure.
in
I
78.
don't remember how all those
Yeah,
get sorted out.
I think he's a Generation X. Baby boomers are born from 81 to 97. So anybody born in that group is a millennial.
No, millennial. Yeah.
Millennials 81 and 97. So that's you're in there with LeBron, Aaron Rodgers, Kevin Durant. Then the Generation Xers are Kobe is in there, and then obviously Jordan's at the tail end of the baby boomers like me. So we all got different ways of approaching things. Millennials can be a little bit more passive aggressive, a little bit more more nuanced, whatever. But yeah, again, look, we know LeBron loves watching basketball. He loves watching all sports. Like
Sure.
I when people say, "Oh, he's full of it," I go, "No, sure the guy was sitting at home last night with his kids and whoever was around, with the big screen TV watching all the games. He loves basketball. He loves all sports. So I'm sure that's authentic. But yeah, I think he's just pushing back against the media because he does truly feel he should have more than 4 MVPs, which he should. And I think he still holds it against him that he wasn't Defensive Player of the Year back. I think it was in 2013-14 or 2012-13 when he was at Miami.
I just think it's a weird argument. This guy is great, but he didn't deserve that award.
Yeah,
it's almost like denigrating that award. Be like, this award is for players who are not that good.
Right. Yeah. Just kind of like Grant Williams. Next year can be most improved, when apparently Stan Van Gundy thinks that Grant Williams is going to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, as he thinks that Jason Tatum is going to be in that conversation along with Marcus Smart and Rob Williams. So I'm thinking the Celtics have the greatest defense ever.
Stan Van Gundy sucks. Sap, he sucks.
Yeah,
his commentary is not even good. He drives me crazy.
Well, he's criticizing the Celtics, who had the 25-point lead.
Right, he was burying them. They needed this basket. They were up by 20. The Celtics.
Doesn't he also sound a little bit like Melissa McCarthy doing Sean Spicer?
I don't know. Maybe.
He's got that voice. He could say really good things, but his delivery and tone are so annoying that it's a turnoff. I think a lot of the things he says, obviously the guy knows basketball, but a lot of them are good. But again, he was harping more on the Celtics doing the wrong thing rather than Milwaukee doing the wrong thing. And the Celtics were up 25. But again, there's different ways to do it. The Celtics are going to have 4 Defensive Player of the Year candidates next year. Apparently they're the 85 Bears and the 2000 Ravens rolled into one.
Yeah. Well, all right. I just wanted to get a complaint about Stan Van Gundy in there.
Well, one of him, and although he's very liberal on Twitter, I don't know.
It's great.
There's great.
Plenty of annoying liberals.
Oh yeah, Rex Chapman sometimes can be a little annoying, although we love Rex. Stan Van Gundy can be that way too, but yeah, he's kind of an acquired taste, I guess. But yeah, again, there's sometimes the voice just all I can think of is Melissa McCarthy as Sean Spicer.
And I know he drove you crazy last year as the coach of the Pelicans. He's not a good coach anymore.
Well, he's just a negative guy.
He's very negative.
Yeah,
you could hear it on the broadcast. So negative.
That's not the way it works anymore. Look at what Willie Green did this year in New Orleans. I want to go play for New Orleans now, run through a wall for Willie Green. If you're not necessarily, and I think Willie Green's going to be one of the best coaches in the league shortly, especially if they can get the Zion situation back. That's going to be a really good team. But he hasn't advanced to what the game is now, Stan Van Gundy, but he must have a good agent because he keeps getting back into TV, and he's probably on 3 different teams' payrolls because he's like a one and done coach. So he's probably got checks coming in from everywhere.
Right. Yeah. All right, Sap. Well, that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks for the full press coverage. Make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. And make sure you check out the YouTube version of the show if you're not already, youtube.com/Jet Stryer. And you can find the show wherever podcasts are found. Just type in the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We will be back later in the week talking about more of these playoff series and reacting to what is going on, as there's news every day in the NBA. So make sure you stay with us, and we will talk to you later, everybody. See ya.